Ladies, gentlemen and MBs, just to let you know that this video contains discussions of mental health, including existentialism and suicide ideology. It also has flickering imagery and scenes that may be a sensory overload. Please put your own well-being first. On the 6th of October 2017, the Humble Bundle released the game Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. This game, designed by the titular Bennett Foddy, sees you playing as Diogenes, a man inside a cauldron as you climb up a mountain using a hammer. The mountain, constructed entirely of assets created for other games, gets increasingly difficult to advance up, and at every obstacle the chances are extremely good that you will fall, losing a lot of progress, possibly even falling all the way back to the very beginning of the game. This game is uniquely frustrating to play. The placement of the obstacles is designed in just the right way to make you struggle to latch onto the correct spots, and moving yourself with a hammer is perplexing. On the face of it, it's simple. You move the mouse, Diogenes moves the hammer. And if you watch Let's Plays of the game where people are struggling, you think, well, I don't get why this is so hard for them. Because it's difficult to express the way that it feels unless you actually play it yourself. So the way it feels to me when I play is that the hammer has a weight to it, but Diogenes kind of doesn't. So movement is dependent on you getting used to that feeling, which is very easy to lose grasp of. So sometimes you do what you think is a perfect swing of the hammer, only to find yourself doing one that's much too short and close to the body, and sometimes you'll accidentally move too fast and it will send you flying really far down. At first it seems like it's badly put together, like it doesn't work in the way that you're expecting it to, but actually it's all quite by design. Bennett Foddy is known for making games that are annoying to control. He was famously behind QWOP and GURP, games that are fun to say but do not feel good to play. Where those make for fun, jokey experiences, Getting Over It feels more sincere in what it's doing. The game is about failure and continuing on in the face of it. As you climb the mountain, Foddy regularly speaks to the player, explaining his processes behind making the game and giving quotes about failure when you have particularly long falls. To play this game is to know that you will fail a lot, but to continue to try and get over it. The controls of the game being so difficult to get a hold of and so finicky that they can ruin all your progress with the slightest miscalculation really adds to what the game is doing. Because the catharsis of getting past a difficult obstacle in spite of having to battle the controls is so much more gratifying than it would be if the controls were less difficult. You end up feeling kind of accomplished as you climb up this fake mountain as this man in a pot. Why on earth do we play videos game? This is something that the game makes me question. What are videos game even for? Why am I putting in all this effort and spending all of this time for something that doesn't really matter? People spend hours and hours of their lives just trying to get Banjo-Kazooie to collect all the Chaos Emeralds from Dr. Cortex so he can rescue Princess Rosalina, and what do they get out of it? No tangible reward, no thing that you can take with you into the world to show that you've accomplished your goals. It's all just fake. You aren't really climbing a mountain in this game. There is no actual obstacle you're overcoming. You're just sitting at your computer, swinging your mouse around in circles, and occasionally getting annoyed because your fake man fell off the fake mountain. But at least other videos game pretend to have a purpose, a story, a sense of achievement. Getting Over It is blunt and clear about the fact that climbing this mountain is just an unenjoyable struggle that you are choosing to put yourself through for no particular reason other than it's a game that got popular on Steam for a few weeks, so now you feel like you have to beat it. If you make it to the top, which according to the Steam achievements less than 7% of players have done, then what have you actually achieved? If you get there, the reward is that you get to go into a chat room with other players who made it up. Which doesn't seem like that much 4 years later. I don't know, is it still popping up in the Bennett Foddy Discord? But beyond that, all you really get is to start the game over again. Only this time, you're in a nicer pot. I released my first video on this channel on the 13th of June 2016. It was a video of the worst films of 2016 so far, and it sucked. Like, I had no idea what I was doing, the audio was atrocious, there was practically no editing at all, and it was just awful. I long since deleted it off the channel, and mercifully no footage of it exists anywhere that I can find. It is lost to the ages. But it is still a milestone I think is worth noting, and assuming I managed to get this video done on time, then it is releasing on the 5th anniversary of my first video on this channel. I've been doing this for 5 years. When I started out, I had no idea that the channel was going to become what it is, a communist asexual video essay channel that at the time of writing is just shy of 25,000 subscribers. I just wanted to do quick, off-the-cuff reviews of the movies I saw at the cinema. I was bad at that. All the videos I made in that style are also lost to time, thank goodness. It took me a while to start making videos that I actually feel proud of. There was a lot of trial and error involved for me to figure out what the voice of this channel would actually be, and I'm sure there will be a lot more to come. Even while I was figuring out what this channel wanted to say, I was still just, completely unknown. I think by the end of year 3 I had just shy of 400 subscribers. Then suddenly last year, whoosh, number go up. I've been doing this for 5 years and it took 4 years for anything to happen. For most of the time that I was on this platform, I was talking poorly to a small number of people, and now I'm talking slightly less poorly to a larger number of people. Thank you all for being here. I hope that I don't depress you. For all that it is extremely gratifying to receive any level of attention for my work at all, I mean, even getting a single comment is lovely, although the first one I ever got was one telling me my channel was never going to get anywhere, and I wish I had kept a screenshot of it. I can't lie and say that those first 4 years weren't kind of demoralising. You work like hell on trying to make this thing work, on trying to make art that you can be proud of, on learning and growing your craft, and almost no one is there to appreciate it. I know it's selfish to think like that, to think about it in terms of the audience that isn't there instead of the one that is, but it's hard not to, and there are so many people who are on YouTube who are in that position I was for the first 4 years. I spent a little while in a few small YouTuber groups on Facebook, and I saw the many people who were in my situation, working really hard to make video after video and having them seen by a tiny number of people. I eventually left all those groups. I met a couple of cool folks in them, but largely I found them to be kind of toxic and full of people who were expecting that they were going to get instant fame and success on this platform, and that was just kind of sad. Especially when you consider how much of succeeding here, of being seen by a lot of people, is down to blind luck. I had my blow up last year for no reason at all. I just got lucky when my video about the aphobic episode of House randomly got scooped up by the algorithm and seen by, holy crap, 350,000 people now. That's a lot. But I didn't do anything special when I released that. I just did a video, same as any other, and then a couple of months after I released it, suddenly it did well. Any success I have had is based on that one video, and as far as I can tell, completely at random. I'm thrilled to have had this luck. I don't want any of this to sound like sour grapes, complaining about why didn't I do well fast enough. It won't help me any to focus on the negative of why it took so long to get here, or to try and figure out what the reason was the algorithm favoured me when it did. I just got lucky, and all I can do is keep going, keep making stuff, and trying to get better at what I'm doing. After all, I've been doing this for 5 years. So the world sucks, right? I know, it may come as a bit of a shock that I think that, but it doesn't really take much to come to that conclusion, does it? Just throw a dart and you'll hit a horrible thing that's happening. I suppose as good a place as any to start is the pandemic. We are still in it. We shouldn't still be, but we are. So many lives have been lost, and even though the vaccines are now being rolled out, we're still not out of the woods yet. At every step of the way, the UK government has mishandled everything. They allowed hundreds of thousands of people to die because their wanton corruption made them want to get businesses open faster and hand lucrative contracts to their mates. Perhaps most notably was when, rather than give the parents of underprivileged families vouchers so that they could buy food, they gave a contract to Chartwells, a firm which at the time was run by a former member of David Cameron's business advisory group. Chartwells went on to provide these families with the most disgusting, meagre food parcels they could possibly manage. We're talking half a carrot and some tuna scraped into a money bag. And this was only in January. You really can't make this shit up. It's a good job that we have a strong opposition. And this is just one very specific example of all the bullshit that is constantly happening. If it's not the Tories, then it's the police committing consequence-free murders of black people. If it's not those bastards, then it's the ever-present threat of climate change. If it's not the ways that we're destroying the only planet that we have, then it's Elon Musk on SNL. It never ends. Every single day, the worst thing in the world is happening, and I'm just so fucking tired. We have been stuck inside for just over a year, not able to go any further than the shops. Unless, like me, you have to go into a day job where you're around plenty of other people and you always feel just a little bit in danger. And I'm one of the lucky ones. At least I didn't lose my job over this. And I can go outside. Plenty of people haven't been able to for health reasons. It was especially difficult over the first few months of this year as we dealt with a long, lonely winter. It was big sad times. Even the few positives that we've seen in the midst of this are tinged with depressing stuff. Work from home was implemented, and more people gained access to the workplace than ever before. But now, big corporations are looking to revoke that access in the name of going back to normal. Because making things more accessible for disabled and neurodivergent people was only ever an accidental side effect. I don't know how we've all kept going for so long. In this capitalist hellscape that puts money over the needs of human beings time and time again. That allowed this crisis to spread out of control when other countries show us just how well it could have been contained. It feels like we are constantly at a breaking point, where surely this time we've had the worst possible thing that could happen, and then suddenly people are making climate change worse so that they can buy a string of numbers that lets them pretend that they own a PNG. The constancy of it is just unbearable. And when you see all this, every new news story, every fascist coup, every anti-LGBT group granted charity status, every attempt to disenfranchise working class voters, doesn't life all just feel a bit meaningless? No Man's Land is a 1974 play by English playwright Harold Pinter. It's set in the drawing room of an elegant townhouse where Hurst, a successful poet, brings home Spooner, an unsuccessful poet, who he met at the pub. The two talk of this and that and proceed to get very drunk. They discuss their lives through reminiscences, these seeming to be highly fanciful and often appearing contradictory. As you see them talking in this way, you begin to wonder what their motivations are. What are they hiding? They continue in this manner until Hurst gets agitated and leaves the room. Before Spooner has a chance to do anything, Hurst's living servants, Briggs and Foster, show up and treat him with suspicion and hostility. Spooner is put on the back foot as Briggs, Foster and a returning Hurst exert their position over him, ultimately locking him in the room overnight, likely beating him. The next morning, more of the same continues. Spooner and Hurst discuss a past they seem to have had together, with Hurst having maybe slept with Spooner's wife. Foster and Briggs continue to show their hostility and mistrust of Spooner, while also trying to use their position to exert some pressure on Hurst. This carries on until Spooner begs Hurst for employment in a long, passionate speech, is met with coldness, and the play ends. One of Pinter's particular strengths as a writer is the hostile room. Through plays like Homecoming, The Dumbwaiter, and The Birthday Party, he puts characters in locations where they are trapped, and people show up to cause them distress and harm. Forces outside of their control make them paranoid and restless, with no clear way to change their circumstances. They're bleak and uncomfortable plays, with the laughter often coming naturally from the tension of these people who should not be together, making awkward small talk to avoid having to address their situation. The tension ratcheting even more as Pinter expertly lays in long, pregnant pauses. Something so characteristic in his writing that they became known as Pinter pauses. No Man's Land fits into this particularly well. Spooner is brought into Hurst's home as an outsider and initially uses Hurst's infirmity and drunkenness to advantage himself. But before too long, Foster and Briggs arrive and the tone shifts. Suddenly, Spooner is no longer a manipulator trying to get something unclear out of Hurst. He is an interloper that these two younger men have to deal with. Their presence combined with Hurst sees Spooner alone against a somewhat united household. At every moment the tension is palpable. Every line feels barbed. You feel like Spooner is fighting for his survival as he tries to wheedle his way into Hurst's affection and to undermine Briggs and Foster. Alongside these ever-shifting personal dynamics is Pinter's strong choices of language. He had a, shall we say, unique way with words that both adds incredibly to the tension that was already building and breaks it for relief and humour when needed, with perhaps my favourite example of both being this exchange. To him? To a pisshole collector? To a shithouse operator? To a jam rag vendor? What the fuck are you talking about? Look at him! He's a mince juice bottler! A fucking shit cake baker! What are you talking to him for? Yes, but he's a good man at heart. I knew him at Oxford. The tone constantly moves around like this, as fluctuating as the character's memories. The audience is never given a chance to feel comfortable. It creates an anxiety that draws on your expectations of a narrative and clearly defined motivations that the play will simply never deliver. Everything is constantly uncertain and in a state of flux. Neither you or the characters you're watching will ever get the chance to feel comfortable. YouTube as a platform sucks. This is a sentiment that you may well have heard before from other content creators that you watch, from small creators trying to build their brand, to medium-sized creators just about making a living doing this, to huge creators who are kind of like celebrities if they weren't actually famous. Everyone seems to agree, this website blows. Yes, I am perfectly willing to bite the hand that feeds me, because it also likes to punch me in the face. YouTube sells itself as being a place where creators are the ones that really matter. After all, they are the you in YouTube. But the way that the website is structured is downright hostile to its independent creators. The way things are at present strongly favours big traditional media corporations and bad actors. Those who actually make up the majority of videos on the platform are the ones who suffer underneath the way that it is built. Everything on this website is decided by what you'll hear creators speak of in hushed tones lest they anger it. The algorithm. What videos get recommended to people, what becomes popular, what you see when you open the homepage is all decided by an algorithm, a string of code somewhere that no one really understands. Which makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, you need some way to decide these things, and why not give it to a computer program? The issue is that we don't know how the algorithm works. We don't know what will get picked up by it, we don't know what will get rejected by it. It decides so much of any creator or viewer's time, and the way that it works is a mystery. This is something that YouTube is doing on purpose. They are intentionally opaque about how exactly the algorithm works and what it wants. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, though. If YouTube were completely transparent about the way it worked, then people would all change their content to match up to it. If you know how the system works, then it's a lot easier to game it. So there is certainly a lot of sense to keeping its secrets hidden, otherwise the website would become even more dreadful because all the videos would be the exact same. But it does create problems for people because it's also fickle. They change it regularly, so something that would be successful and popular one month might go all but unwatched the month after, with the only consistency seeming to be that Jimmy Fallon will be fine. You can do nothing different at all between two videos, and suddenly something will make it fail, and then you'll have to adapt to a change where you don't even know what the change is. And if your videos aren't doing as well, then believe me, YouTube will let you know. As you log into your YouTube Studio page, you'll often be greeted by big red text telling you the exact percentage that your video is doing worse than the last one, how your views are down, your revenue is down, your subscriptions are down. A bit of advice I've heard from a lot of people is that you should try not to pay attention to the numbers because then that's all you'll end up obsessing over. But it's really hard not to do that when they shove the numbers in your face at every opportunity. So all of this puts the general existence on this site into a miserable place, where everything that you release is a gamble. And that's only the beginning. Before your video even encounters the algorithm, you have to deal with actually getting your video viewable. The uploader is not very good. It's usually slow, it compresses your videos weirdly, and you have to deal with the advertising checks. So, since YouTube got into legal trouble for allowing unregulated advertising to children to happen on their platform for years, they decided that the onus should be on the creators to decide if their videos are advertiser-friendly or not. Then they do an automatic check on it anyway to decide if your videos actually are, so... If they find it isn't, then you get age restricted and your video won't be visible to as many people. Basically a fate worse than death. Then if you manage to get through that, you'll probably also have to deal with the copyright system. The way that YouTube works copyright is that they essentially have a giant pool of copyrighted material that they can spot in videos. If you put that material into your video and it spots it, then you get a copyright claim, and the copyright holder gets to monetize your video. You can challenge this to say that what you are doing is fair use, but if you lose this counterclaim, then you get a copyright strike, and get enough of those and you lose your whole channel. And if you're making one of these counterclaims, then you are going into it at a disadvantage. YouTube has absolutely no reason to care if a video constitutes fair use or not. Whether the creator monetizes the video or some media corporation does, YouTube makes money either way, so they don't have to care if you can legally use that work or not. This leaves the system open to abuses from bad faith actors. Sometimes people or companies will just pretend to own the copyrighted material that is being used, and if you can prove that they don't, then there is no punishment to them for having made this false claim. They can just go do it to someone else's video. If it's not false claims, then it's trying to use the strike system to harm creators who are critical of their work. If you want a prime example of that, then look at the attempt Gilson B. Pontes made earlier this year on James Stephanie Sterling. Thank God for them. The ultimate fact is that this system is open to abuses from all corners, and YouTube does not have to care because they will profit either way. There is absolutely no incentive for them to actually help creators. They are only driven by making money, which is also why so much white supremacist, misogynistic and queerphobic content gets to continue unchallenged. But God forbid that you say fuck too many times or you might not be advertiser friendly. It leads to bizarre circumstances where a terrible channel like The Quartering can talk about how She-Ra is corrupting the children with its queer agenda, but calls Nazis the bad guys from World War II? Yes, even the self-proclaimed bastions of free speech are self-censoring in case they upset the advertisers. No one on this platform feels comfortable. Everyone who is on here is trying their damnedest to work within a system that is broken to its core. YouTube has no need to change this broken way of working because it's still profitable. We have nowhere else to upload our content after all. I mean, what are we going to do? Go to Vimeo? Human beings have a tendency to try and find meaning in our lives. From young ages, we are taught that we have an inherent worth, and that if we work in the correct way, then we will achieve something of merit. That our decisions and the consequences of our decisions are important, and that by extension, we have meaning. But we don't. Not really. The world is a constant string of pointless misery that is completely out of our control. Individual actions won't really affect societal structure. The things that you do won't stop the world from burning. All these terrible things keep happening, and it makes our short existence a struggle against everything. We live in a cold, uncaring universe that has no meaning. But we still seek it. We still look for the meaning in our lives, our purpose on the planet, our reason for existing. We create art, we ask questions, we examine the way that things work because we are human beings and that is what we do. We look for the patterns, the meaning, the stuff that says all of this has to make sense somehow. We can't be here for no reason. When faced with a universe that we know means nothing, we still try to find meaning for ourselves. This creates an existential dread and a cognitive dissonance because we know that the search will be fruitless, but we keep searching anyway. To seek meaning in a world that we know has none is absurd. This is the formational principle of absurdism, a theory of philosophy with its origins in the works of 19th century philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, that was expanded on by the 20th century philosopher Albert Camus. Camus formed his ideas, based on the likes of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, during the Second World War in Nazi-occupied France. This war, engulfing so much of the world, which happened only 21 years after the war to end all wars, saw a people made all too aware of the meaninglessness of their lives. I mean, what does anything you do truly matter when at any moment a bomb could get dropped on you, ending it all? In living this, Camus recognized the absurd. He put forth that the human condition is inherently absurd, and that once we are aware of this absurdity, we have certain options and roles that we can take on to help us combat it. In his 1942 text, The Myth of Sisyphus... Sorry, one second. This is the section that deals with suicide ideation, so if you particularly need to skip past that, then head to chapter 7. In his 1942 text, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus says that where other texts view absurdity as an endpoint, he is looking on it as a foregone conclusion. Rather than trying to figure out what it was that led humanity into absurdity, he seeks to explore our responses to it. Because absurdism isn't the same as nihilism. It doesn't think that human life is completely without meaning, that every single thing we do is utterly pointless. It acknowledges that we create our own significances, find our own meanings in life, but just with the knowledge that that meaning is personal. It matters to you, but it is transient. beyond maybe a circle of people around you, it will all fall apart after you die. The meaning that you have found won't change the universe. Continuing to pursue whatever kind of meaning that you can scrape together, even though you know it will amount to nothing and it will all end when you die, is the absurd existence that Camus is exploring our responses to. The opening line of A Myth of Sisyphus is, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." Because what quite possibly seems like a natural response to learning that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, nothing that you achieve in your life will actually amount to anything, is to want it to stop, to end it. To commit suicide is to confess that, yes, life truly has no meaning. This is a philosophical problem because how do we reconcile living a life when we know that it has no meaning? Because for most of us, and I hope for anyone watching, our desire to live outweighs our thoughts of suicide. We get into the habit of living before we acquire the habit of thinking. But if we do choose to keep living, which I hope you do, then what is it that keeps us from the absurd? What is it that quietens that voice in our head that makes us question what the point of doing anything even is? It's hope. The dream idea that we can find and create meaning. We can make things better. We can put that meaning into the universe. Camus explores the various ways that we put off the absurd through distraction and denial, the ways that we try to create meaning through art and politics. But to him, none of these are satisfactory answers to the absurd. They're all just ways of delaying it until we eventually get back around to the question, why shouldn't I just end it? Camus has another suggestion, though, that he thinks is the answer to the absurd. Acceptance. To look at the pointless cruelty and misery of the universe and say, yes, that's fine. But this isn't just saying that life is meaningless and will forever be terrible. It's taking active resistance against the universe, embracing the meaninglessness of existence and just loving living it anyway. Letting the struggle for meaning be the meaning itself. Camus ends the essay by discussing the titular Myth of Sisyphus. Possibly the most perfect metaphor for the absurd that there has ever been. Sisyphus, for reasons that vary from telling to telling, is punished by rolling a giant boulder up a hill. When it gets to the top, it rolls right the way back down again and he has to follow it and start over. This is all that Sisyphus will ever do, forever. He has to struggle with an impossible task that he knows is impossible. So, according to Camus, the only way that Sisyphus could possibly contend with this is to enjoy it, to smile every time the boulder rolls back down the hill and go running after it just for the thrill of it. I leave Sisyphus now at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burdens again. But Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates gods and raises rocks. He too concludes that all is well. The universe, henceforth having no master, seems to him neither sterile nor futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of that night-filled mountain, forms in itself a world. The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Oh God. In Eugene Ionesco's 1959 play Rhinoceros, the rhinoceroses are a metaphor. The play is centred around the character Berenger, an everyman figure that Ionesco used in several plays, as he witnesses the world fall apart around him. He is having a meal with his friend Jean when, all of a sudden, a rhinoceros runs down the street. People are initially concerned, but ultimately kind of ignore it. I mean, these things will happen, won't they? But soon, another rhinoceros shows up, and another and another. They run through the streets causing havoc wherever they go. The cause of them is a mystery, until the wife of one of Berenger's work colleagues shows up to say that her husband turned into a rhinoceros. Suddenly it's clear that the rhinoceroses were all once people. They've all changed, and more are changing around them. Berenger can't understand why people are changing. He sees no possible reason that anyone would want to stop being human and start being a pachyderm. But their numbers are ever increasing. Even his friend Jean, who so prided himself on his appearance, eloquence and thought, gives himself over to becoming one of these savage beasts. As the play draws to its close, everyone Berenger knows has become a rhinoceros. He may be the only human being left. The rhinoceroses are a metaphor for fascism, and the play is a metaphor for a conformity that comes about under mob mentalities. Ionesco grew up in Romania, with his teenage years and early adulthood taking place between the two wars. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, he saw the rise of a group known as the Iron Guard, a fascist organisation that made a point of targeting the working class and students to win them over to their ideas. He witnessed so many people moving over to this reprehensible political position, and the longer it went on, the more people started to just conform to the idea, going along with the crowds, being swayed by seeing how many people were feeling that. Surely, if all these people went with them, then they must have some kind of point, right? Even people you would hope for better from. Ionesco described seeing this change in a 1970 interview. University professors, students, intellectuals were turning Nazi, becoming Iron Guards one after another. We were 15 people who used to get together to find arguments, to discuss, to try and find arguments opposing theirs. It was not easy. From time to time, one of the group would come out and say, "I don't agree at all with them, to be sure, but on certain points, I must admit. For example, the Jews." And that kind of comment was a symptom. 3 weeks later, that person would become a Nazi. He was caught in a mechanism. He accepted everything. He became a rhinoceros. Towards the end, it was only 3 or 4 of us who resisted. The play is a warning at how quickly it spreads, how insidious it is, just how quickly people conform. There's one character who is a co-worker of Berenger. He is a big political agitator. You know that one guy in every office who finds a way to disagree with everything you say and bring it back around to his pet political topic every time? Well, it's that guy. When he hears about the rhinoceroses, he is completely against all of it. He outright rejects it. He is too opinionated and sure of himself to want to give in to that. Of course, as soon as the boss becomes a rhinoceros, this guy goes too. All it takes is one person convincing even the most steadfast opposition on a single point, and you may lose them to this conformity. By the end of the play, Berenger wishes that he could become a rhinoceros. In a world where everyone else has become one, then why shouldn't he join them? Why should he resist conformity? But he has resisted too long. He can't become a rhinoceros. In a world where everyone has conformed, he is the last human being left. No! No! With all the pressures to make something that will get picked up by the algorithm, creators have to find a way to game the system, as it were, to make sure that their content will have some level of success, to use common title trends, popular relevant topics, optimum video lengths, that sort of thing, to try and find some kind of favour with this assortment of numbers that controls so much of our fate on this website. Now, this is sensible. You put videos on the website, then you want them to be seen, you know? But there are issues that come out of it. Once a creator has found a kind of content that gets popular, then it's only natural for them to want to lean into that. If it worked once, then why shouldn't it keep working? Audiences will stick around for stuff that is similar to the stuff they already liked. This means that a lot of content creators will find their one thing, their shtick, and they'll just do it endlessly. Once something gets popular, it is exceedingly rare to see experimentation, because YouTube as a platform does not reward that experimentation. Videos that do things differently tend not to be as popular with audiences who came for the thing you are known to do, and they will underperform. Enough videos do that, then your YouTube career might be over. So there is an active incentive to not change your work. So people stop taking risks, stop experimenting, they just keep creating the same stuff over and over and over. This can form something of a repetitive malaise where the audience is barely thinking about what they're watching, they're just consuming out of habit. Audiences get into such a routine with these things. I don't want to criticise people for enjoying their YouTube videos this way, I mean, I do it a bit too. It's comforting to know that your favourite guy who opens boxes of Pokemon cards on camera will still be doing it tomorrow, and you don't necessarily want to see his deep dive into the production of the anime. But after a while, it does start to just get exhausting seeing this repetition play out all over the site and to see so little variation within the content itself. When people are trying to make their content as algorithm-friendly as possible, there are certain things they'll need to do within the videos. The calls to action. Attempts to get you to engage with their videos because engagement means number go up, and number go up means algorithm recommends. You don't have to look too hard to start to see the script. how many times have you heard someone say, smash that like button, ring that bell, let me know what you think I should react to next in the comments. Please engage with the video, this is all I have. Then there's the repeated sponsor reads, because, hey, AdSense revenue sucks and people have to eat. But if I had £1 for every time that someone has told me to buy Raycon E25 wireless earbuds, made by the musician Ray J, recommended by Melissa Etheridge and Snoop Dogg, get 15% off by clicking the link in the description, then I would be a wealthy man. It's all part of the repetition that subdues you into comfort. Not thinking, just watching, and not branching out to other people's content. Keep watching these same things and this creator will keep making them. I am by no means immune to this. I have all my little rituals. I start every content warning with ladies, gentlemen and MBs. I put, one sec, this picture of Speckle in every video for no reason, and I talk a lot about the same subject pretty frequently. I'd like to think I do new things with the subjects each time, but I worry that I am too repetitive. I mean, how many times can you hear me say I'd just like to thank my patrons for indulging me in making videos like this, with an extra special thanks to Chris Harper, Dan Brown, William Gray, Bags and Finn Flaherty. If you'd like to support me, then head to patreon.com/DavidJBradley, and if not, then you can still help out a great deal by liking, commenting, subscribing, or clicking one of the videos that will appear at the end, before those words start to lose all meaning. When you have to keep conforming to these standards, then it can make the work you do feel less meaningful. Like you're creating stuff for hollow reasons, like the art that you create won't have any effect on the people who are viewing it. I mean, I've been doing this for 5 years, and what if I've already made the only good work I'll ever do? What if I just keep repeating myself to the same crowd of people who don't want to hear anything else? Breaking down the concepts of the ways that we might experience the world on a theoretical level makes a certain amount of sense. To look at the state of things, the ways that people are acting, and ask, why? There is value to that. It can be really helpful to people to make sense of things, but it's always going to be just a little bit limited when it comes to the absurd. Because at the centre of this concept is the simple statement that the world and life do not make sense. They do not have meaning. So how exactly can you put something inherently nonsensical into a logical text? You end up with a form that is completely divorced from the content. You can't really feel it. But at around the same time that Camus was putting together these theories, there was something of a movement of writers who were rallying against using formalist approaches like this to express what people are feeling. In a collection of essays called Our Examination Round His Factification for Incamination of Work in Progress, one writer had this to say of their work in contrast to that of philosophers. Here is direct expression, pages and pages of it. And if you don't understand it, ladies and gentlemen, it is because you are too decadent to receive it. You are not satisfied unless form is so strictly devoid from content that you can comprehend the one almost without bothering to read the other. The rapid skimming and absorption of the scant cream of sense is made possible by what I may call a continuous process of copious intellectual salivation. The form that is an arbitrary and independent phenomenon can fulfill no higher function than that of a stimulus for a tertiary or quartary conditioned reflex of dribbling comprehension. This decidedly salty gentleman was Irish author Samuel Beckett, who was one of the writers at the forefront of what became known as the theatre of the absurd. This was a phrase coined by theatre critic Martin Esslin for his book, aptly named The Theatre of the Absurd. This looks at the work of several playwrights, primarily Samuel Beckett, Arthur Adamov, Eugenie Ionesco and Jean Genet, and categorises them into an informal movement of theatre that grew in post-war Europe, mostly centred in Paris. Their plays work towards many of the same ideas that Camus was concerned with, the inherent meaninglessness of existence and humanity's struggle against that. But instead of just talking about it in a theoretical sense, they were making this physical, real, something that an audience watching it could only be directly challenged by. In the theatre of the absurd, there is no sitting back comfortably, there is no dissociation from the text. You have no choice but to feel every moment of it. However, it should be pointed out that the playwrights discussed in the context of the theatre of the absurd were not collaborators. The theatre of the absurd was a label applied to them by other people. There was no intentional plan in them all writing plays of similar intent. They were almost certainly familiar with one another's work, but each was a lone creator with entirely his own idea of what the work they were creating was for. The similarity in their works, Esslin contends, reflects the preoccupations and anxieties, the emotions and thinking of many of their contemporaries in the Western world. As much as their plays were attempts to put the absurd dread that so many felt into very physical terms, they were also responses to the theatre that existed prior to this period. Through the early 20th century, the trend in theatre had turned towards realism. The primary form of entertainment within the theatre was well-made plays. Cleanly structured pieces with tidy beginnings, middles and ends, recognisable characters going through plots that were easy to follow. Obviously, these pieces could be challenging and moving works, but the formality of them allowed the audience to distance themselves from actually having to think when they watched them. Absurdist theatre would seek to break apart these ideas. Certain plays start out with similar conceits to that of the well-made play, and turn them on the head through breakdowns of language and advancements into dreamlike states, such as Ionesco's The Bold Soprano or Genet's The Maids. Others reject the very idea of being recognisable as theatre as it was known at the time, like Beckett's work Happy Days. As time went on, some of the writers became more experimental, and their plays began to resemble reality less and less, stripped down to the barest components that could draw out the most visceral emotional responses. Beckett was the master of this more experimental side of the theatre, creating bizarre pieces like Not I, where a pair of disembodied lips float in the darkness and deliver a rapid, disjointed monologue that is deeply unsettling to see and hear. When there isn't even a person to attach these words to, you have no choice but to take them into yourself and think about your own existence. It's terrifyingly effective. Of course, sometimes it went too far to the point where nothing is really being said. For instance, his play Breath is literally just a pile of rubbish on stage with someone making a couple of cries from offstage and lasts for approximately 14 seconds. I am forever convinced that he wrote that just to see if someone would perform any old tosh just because Samuel Beckett wrote it. Plays like these work to make you question what even constitutes a play. If there are defined characters, you're unlikely to ever get resolution for them. Plots will be non-existent, and the language will be intentionally confusing and difficult to parse. Because this is not intended to show you a drama. This is intended to show you life. Life writ large in all its incomprehensibility up on the stage for everyone to see. So unreal that it can only be real. It doesn't matter if you don't necessarily understand what the play is about or what it's trying to say. Many are deliberately obtuse so that you can't. What matters is that you feel it. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into an enormous insect. So goes the infamous opening line of Franz Kafka's 1915 novella, The Metamorphosis. It tells the story of Gregor Samsa, a travelling salesman who one day, for no apparent reason, turns into a giant insect. Probably a roach of some kind. Once his family realise what has happened, they lock him in his room, his sister occasionally putting food in for him, as they try to continue with their lives as best they can until eventually Gregor dies. This story is horrific. It's truly one of the most horrible things that I've ever read. At every moment following his transformation, Gregor is met with unrelenting cruelty and neglect. His father regularly beats him to get him back to his room. His sister often forgets to feed him, and sometimes withholds the food if she happens to see him as she goes into his room to put it down. And if they so much as hear him while they're talking in the other room, they will suddenly fall silent because they don't want him to be a part of their lives. When Gregor dies, they find it to be a relief, as though their troubles are finally over. It's deeply upsetting to read all this incessant misery, as Gregor just never receives any kindness from any of the people who are supposed to love him. This kind of depressing writing is something of a staple of Kafka's work. He had a tendency to make stories that were just miserable and cruel and hopeless. The desired effect upon reading them seems to be to ruin your day. With works like The Trial showing a man fall victim to a nonsensical fascist state, or In the Penal Colony detailing watching a man get killed by a horrific torture device. It's oppressive and difficult and cruel, but it's also kind of relatable. Because you, the reader, are Gregor Samsa. We don't get to see Gregor before the metamorphosis has already happened. We enter the story with his first time waking up in full bug mode. But he spends almost no time questioning how or why this happened. At the start of the second paragraph he asks, "What has happened to me?" and then never has any other thoughts about how he has transformed. In fact, by the end of the first page, his thoughts have already turned to work. Far more concerning to him than having become a giant cockroach is the fact that he slept through his alarm and will be late getting to his job. In so many ways, this story is a direct indictment of capitalism. Gregor worked to provide for his parents and his sister, and he took on this difficult, demoralising job that is unrewarding and physically exhausting, with the book describing it like this. "Oh God," he thought, "what an exhausting job I've picked on. Travelling about day in, day out. It's much more irritating work than doing the actual business in the warehouse, and on top of that, there's the trouble of constant travelling, of worrying about train connections, the bed and irregular meals. Casual acquaintances that are always new and never become intimate friends. The devil take it all. He's had to keep doing this isolating, draining, irritating work day in and day out until it drives him to a breaking point, literalized as the whole bug thing. Naturally, this makes him unable to go to work and he loses his job, and this is where his problems really begin. Because suddenly, Gregor Samsa is unproductive to society. There is no way that he can physically contribute the kind of work that is expected of him. In fact, given his condition, he needs people to help take care of him, and so he is hated. His family never hide their disgust about him for a moment once he loses his job. They act as though he purposefully transformed into a giant insect just so that he could get out of having to make money for them to live on. They never seem to help him, to figure out a way to communicate with him. No one even really seems to care that it was a member of their own family who got metamorphosed. They just vaguely tolerate his existence as long as they don't have to look at him and wait for him to slowly and painfully die. And this is the damage caused by the capitalist idea of this need for productivity. It makes it so that you have to be working, you have to be doing something, you have to be contributing in the ways that have been decided for you. It's this constant pressure being put on you that makes you feel guilty for just taking some time to stop and relax. It strips away your humanity until you are nothing more than just a cog in the machine, playing your part and never questioning it. And if you aren't contributing, if you've lost your job, or you've become too worn down to keep going, or you have a disability that makes it so you can't contribute under the system because they have built it to exclude you, then you get seen as some kind of burden. People treat you with disrespect and mistrust, when the reality is that you're probably facing hardships they don't understand. You get turned into this less than human thing because we have been trained to view any other form of existence as lazy and pathetic. When everything is built around this need to be productive all the time, then it makes those who can't feel like they're little more than an insect. The production schedule of your average YouTube video can be pretty grueling. The majority of YouTube channels are solo operations, one person doing every part of the process. You shoot it yourself, edit it yourself, if you use a script you write it yourself, you handle all the social media yourself, you moderate things on your channel yourself. It's all on you, and you have to find the time to handle all of this. Some people who are doing this one-person production model are somehow releasing a video every single day, sometimes multiple videos every single day. It is more work to take on than you might initially realise. Some people, myself included, make their videos alongside working full-time jobs, using as much of their spare time as they possibly can to get this done, because they have to get content out and they have to get it out quickly. As you've probably guessed, the algorithm likes when things are frequent and regular, and if you fall behind schedule, then that can harm your standing. One of the worst ways to lose your chance of getting shared is not making it quick enough. So, along with the needs to make your video appropriate for advertisers, comply with the copyright system, conform to the kind of content that did well for you in the past, and repeat the same kind of work, you also have to be working on it practically constantly. Because if you take a break, then there is no guarantee that you will have an audience waiting for you when you get back. For people who make their entire living creating on this website, that is an extremely precarious position to be in. To feel like at any moment your entire income could slip away because you aren't working fast enough. Because maybe you have to miss a regular upload for some reason, because maybe you're just tired and it's hard to keep to a consistent schedule. None of which is helped by just how demanding fans of these content creators can be. If someone that makes the videos they like misses an upload or does something slightly different than the thing they specifically want, they can get downright nasty and demanding. I legitimately once saw a content creator release a video from hospital to apologise for missing a single day. They felt like they had to apologise because they needed to go to hospital unexpectedly. I mean, you must see the problem there. So there is all this pressure creators are feeling from all these different avenues, and they're having to work with every moment that they have available, and they have to deal with the other big YouTube issue I've left unmentioned up until now, which is the hate comments and abuse, which I can say from personal experience, having someone threaten to track down your IP address and pierce your skull with a 12-inch steel blade will have a lingering negative effect on you. All of these things coming together just make a perfect situation for a creator to just burn out. A few years ago there was a lot of talk about this from some of the biggest voices on the platform. They were all feeling so exhausted and overwrought by the amount they were creating and the schedules they felt beholden to that they were just completely falling apart. This is the very real situation happening to people all over the platform all of the time. I've had this. I've been doing this for 5 years, and there are so many times when I felt this. Felt as though I have nothing left to give, but like I have to keep going because if I take that break then I might lose the platform I've worked hard to get. And I'm not even really making money doing this. I can't imagine what it's like when it's your primary source of income. It really isn't good for you. But on this platform that requires so much constant input, taking a mental health break could potentially end your career. So why not just quit? If making stuff here is so bad for me, then why do I keep doing it? Why not just leave the platform altogether and live a life free from all that stress? Because I shouldn't have to. This is something I really love doing, and I have no intention to stop anytime soon, but I've been doing this for 5 years and I can't ignore the problems inherent to the system. It is algorithmically run with the sole purpose of making money and with no actual consideration for the people who make the content that makes the money. It's a broken system that needs to be addressed for the continued mental well-being of everyone who creates here. Essentially, we have a choice. We can make life hell for the people who give us so much entertainment and create so much art, trap them into unfulfilling, repetitive modes of operation that are so stressful that literal children are suffering creative exhaustion and burnout. Or we can try and make things better. Of course. Absurdist philosophy and absurdist theatre are separate reactions to the world. They're both forged from the same starting point. The world proved over and over again that it is completely meaningless, but people kept trying to find that meaning anyway. But they both branched off into different directions. One sought to understand and explain this condition within humanity, the other simply to express it. My personal preference is for the theatrical side of absurdism. I find it more direct, more impactful. I struggle with philosophy. I don't enjoy reading it, and what I do read I find difficult to pass. Camus' writing can be verbose and confusing, and I find it hard to connect his explorations of the ways that people respond to the absurdity of life to actual emotions that I feel. Let's just say that SparkNotes was particularly helpful in writing some of this video. But theatre can pass through all that and cut directly to the bone. It is direct expression of emotions that people have felt and are feeling. By stripping away the reality of the situations, making them surreal, dreamlike and terrifying, these plays can show what living in the modern world feels like, the meaninglessness of existence made literal. When I see these characters stuck in worlds that make no sense, but so accustomed to it that they never question their place there, let all of this horror happen to them even though they know it is causing harm, I feel that. It is so easy right now to be overwhelmed by all the everything. The constant bullshit we face with the pandemic and the government and so much other stuff it is impossible to mention it all. The depressing force of it all weighs on us so hard without a moment's respite. This never-ending barrage that we just seem powerless to do anything about makes it feel like there is no point to even existing. I know that we have to fight against this. We have to stand up and fight and do something, and I don't know how. I don't know how to keep from being buried under the weight of it all, to keep going in the face of all this misery. I don't have any answers. I only wish that I did. When I read the works of the absurdist writers, I know that I am not the only one who has felt that weight. They also felt powerless in the face of it. They also felt like there was nothing they could do. They saw our search for meaning among the meaningless, and how little sense it makes that we keep doing that, keep trying even though we know it isn't possible. The playwright saw this and just tried to show people how it feels. Camus just tried to figure out the ways that we are already coping with that knowledge. It seems that there is no way to change it. No. In Waiting for Godot, there is a 4-word stage direction that sums up the entire play. In just 4 syllables that come at the end of each act, Samuel Beckett distills everything that has just happened in the play into the simplest form possible. Well, shall we go? Yes. Let's go. They do not move. They do not move. That's it. That is the play right there. Vladimir and Estragon are two tramps styled after music hall and silent film comedians like Laurel and Hardy, who are waiting for a man named Godot to come. We don't know who Godot is, or why they're waiting for him, or even if they're waiting on the right day, but Vladimir is certain that if they wait for Godot to come, then all their troubles will be over. Estragon is much more cynical about the whole affair, but stays with his friend regardless because he has nothing else. Vladimir waits out of hope, Estragon waits out of despair. They stay in this one spot, a country road, a tree, evening, because that is where Godot has said he will meet them. As they wait, they talk of all manner of things, flitting from subject to subject, doing whatever they can to pass the time. They are all too aware of the futility of their existence, and more than once consider ending it. After all, the tree is right there, and they could manage it if they just had a good bit of rope. Then some relief comes when Pozzo and Lucky arrive. At first they think Pozzo might be Godot, but he probably isn't. He passes time with them, talks about nothing in particular, and in exchange for their civility, he has Lucky do the thing that none of the other characters seem capable of. Think. His thoughts are a long, confusing ramble of mismatched phrases that flow one into the other and repeat with no cohesion. It's terrible. Pozzo and Lucky leave, and soon a boy arrives and tells Vladimir that Godot won't come today, but is sure to come tomorrow. Night falls, Vladimir and Estragon decide they should leave, and then don't. Then in Act 2 it all happens over again. They do not move. Waiting for Godot is often jokingly referred to as the play where nothing happens twice, and it's an apt descriptor. There isn't a plot in the traditional sense, it's just these people hanging about on stage and living. Vladimir and Estragon both talk about how they will be better off apart from each other. Being together in this place with each other, just waiting for this man who never arrives, they are miserable, to the point where suicide is their preferred option. But for the brief time that they are apart between the acts, things seem better for them. Vladimir even pisses better when Estragon isn't there. But the two will never part, even though it seems to be what they both really want. They are codependent, feeling like they need to be together and like they have no other option but to go to the tree and wait for Godot. They're stuck there and no one knows for how long. When they return in the second act, it may be the next day, or it may be months later. Estragon's leg hasn't healed from where he got kicked in Act 1, his boots are where he left them and Lucky's hat remains, but the tree suddenly has some leaves. When Pozzo and Lucky return, they are now blind and dumb. Time is uncertain. Vladimir and Estragon may have been waiting for Godot for years, we just don't know. The play becomes about the interminability of existence in realising that there's no way to judge how long Vladimir and Estragon have been there, repeating the same things over and over, just waiting. It's a life that is devoid of meaning and consciously aware of it, but never making a change because the thing that will give you meaning is surely going to turn up any time now. You live this way, existing just because that's all there is. You just have to keep going this way until eventually you'll die, having done nothing. Stride of a grave and a difficult birth. Down in the hole, lingeringly, the gravedigger puts on the forceps. We have time to grow old. The air is full of our cries, but habit is a great deadener. At me too, someone is looking. Of me too, someone is saying he is sleeping. He knows nothing. Let him sleep on. Absurdism is perhaps one of the most apt philosophies for the time we live in. It came into real form following World War II, at a time when the world seemed like it could never get any worse. Then it got worse. We are facing some of the biggest ever crises of poverty, abuses of power, and rampant bigotry on a planet that is racing towards destruction. We have maybe never been more fucked than we are right now. In the face of all this, we strive for meaning and purpose. We never, for a moment, let any of this stop us from being human. There has never been more people creating art as accessibly as they are now. More people than ever are awake to the injustices that have always been and are taking stands against it. People are giving their all to try and make a better place for us all to live. Perhaps the most absurd thing of all is that we haven't given up hope. The world keeps trying to crush people and they fight back. They do it boldly and proudly and they do not let anyone stop them. Even when our present is the way that it is, with how meaningless I know that it might be, I see all of this and I still have hope for the future. The boulder will keep rolling down the hill. We have long since forgotten why, but we keep pushing it up with a smile on our face. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. So,